All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the longest running show in the world about data. It's called DM Radio. Yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh. Here, we're doing a show on the show. The Data Cloud Summit by Snowflake is coming up next week. So, we're going to talk to a few people, a few experts in the field about what's happening. What do they expect? What do they see taking place here at what is a center of gravity in the data world these days? The Snowflake Summit. We got Hyoun Park of Amalgam Insights to start us off. So, Hyoun, thanks for doing the show as always. You've been tracking the space for a while now. Snowflake is a beating heart of the data business this year. What do you see happening at the Snowflake Summit? What's the big takeaway that you expect from this year?
So I'm expecting several angles this time around. Snowflake is obviously a core data warehouse product at this point. It's interesting to see how quickly it has come in and
Yeah,
become much like Teradata or
right.
just one of these gigantic data players in the enterprise. And I think this means it has multiple angles that multiple constituencies that it has to serve. On the one hand, you have to look at the use of data itself. Obviously, with all of the data within Snowflake, they want to make it easier to use. And they have been making a variety of announcements, both directly with Snowflake itself as well as Snowflake Ventures around the ability to use data more easily, the ability to query data, the ability to use data across different data layers, and to make it more accessible for the actual and normal end user to be able to look at data at the end of the day. So I think that is going to be one area of focus where Snowflake is going to be very interested in usability. A second area is around AI, of course. We've been talking about AI all year long and all of last year, and they have been doing a lot of work both in creating their own models as well as looking at AI observability. So that is going to be a second area about how to make AI more practical and usable. And then this third area in general is going to be that we have had this shift in leadership. And I think the shift in leadership is going to be reflected in less of an emphasis on pure sales and more of an emphasis on what is next from a product perspective.
Hmm. That's pretty interesting. Sloopman out, of course. New CEO is coming in. I don't know much about the new CEO. Do you know? Well, what can you share with us about the new vision and where things are going to go under this new stewardship?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest thing that really stands out is that the leadership has moved from sales led to a product led approach. The leadership is now very smart, I would say, in terms of how AI is used, how technology is used. It to me feels somewhat similar to when IBM made its latest CEO
Hmm.
shift and picked up Arvind Krishna, who came from the IBM research side. Uh, so we are seeing another product person going to the head of the class and driving product change because this is a time when if you're not developing new products and services, you are going to get left behind. Nobody
Yeah.
has the right product stack for 2, 3, 4 years from now. Everybody knows that they have to build something new to get to that next level.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head with the AI being the big issue. And if you look at the market today, I mean, you mentioned Teradata, the old guard. They're trying to retool. I think they're working somewhat feverishly to do that. I don't know if they're going to be able to catch up to the momentum of a Databricks or a Snowflake. And you look at the AI side, and I remember when the Gen AI stuff was taken off, the Snowflake folks were kind of joking about it, the Teradata folks were joking about it. And meanwhile, Databricks, Ali Ghodsi went and bought Mosaic for like what was it, 1.4 billion or something, it was some huge amount of money.
Some, yes.
So like clearly he got the memo. He's like, we're gonna go ahead and grab this piece just so we're embedded in that game. I didn't see that activity from Snowflake. And the big question becomes where do you actually deploy this AI? I mean, you've got Amazon has the capacity to deploy it through their platform. Other big cloud players obviously can do that, but precisely where you train the algorithms and where you point and where you house them, that's the big I think that's the next big battlefield. And so far, it looks like Databricks is further ahead than Snowflake. But what are your thoughts about that? About really owning the center of gravity for AI in the enterprise?
Yeah, the thing that makes AI a little bit different is that the center of gravity for enterprise analytics has traditionally been with structured data, that data
Hmm.
warehouse, the area where Snowflake currently excels at. If you are starting to build a data warehouse from scratch today, you're going to start with Snowflake because it's the
Right.
easiest place to start, relatively cheap to get a proof of concept started. But the problem is with AI, you have semi-structured data and all of this stuff that used to be considered crap in the enterprise world, all the pictures and video and all these documents and PDFs and all the stuff that you couldn't put into a structured database traditionally. But in the AI world, all of that stuff is actually quite important. And that is where the data lake players, the big data players,
Hmm.
are successful. And obviously, Databricks, with its data lake, its lake house branding, has obviously been very successful there.
Yeah.
I think Snowflake has to play catch up because, of course, they are talking about their data lake as well now, but they really did start as a data warehouse company, and that is what they're best known for and where their customers really use them most.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have a theory that I threw out just the other day. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. If you think about the history of enterprise computing, and I'm always trying to understand where we came from, where we're going. Of course, the mainframe are the early days. Then we go to client server, very different world, client server. And it's still alive today. Client server is still very much viable. It's still big mainframes are still around today, of course. But then what happens next is you go to cloud. And then, of course, cloud sort of solidifies and hardens with containerization. And what happened there? All these software companies had to go refactor their technology to work in a containerized world. I think that's happening again now with these foundational models. I think this is another refactoring where companies are going to have to start picturing themselves as part of this ecosystem and really get very clever about becoming truly cloud native, for example, but also really understanding how they are going to fit into this workflow where AI is going to be a prominent player. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree that AI is going to be a fundamental shift in how we think about both computing and work. But the challenging part is that every large technology company is like it's like being in the plane and you are rebuilding the plane while you're trying to
Yeah.
land the plane. Like that's
Right.
literally what's going on right now. Like with AI,
Right.
and generative AI is 18 months old. We still don't know the best way to build generative AI models, quite frankly. We are starting
Right.
to see new approaches such as the mixture of experts uh,
Right.
models
Mistral.
that are coming out where you have 100 200 billion parameters, but you only use 20 or 30 billion to actually answer any sort of question because you go to the specific expert pieces of the model that are best suited to actually answer the question at any given time.
Right.
And that might not end up being the right way to do it either. We are still very much in an experimental phase of even figuring out how to do these models correctly from the starting
Right.
point.
That's such a good
And,
point. And oh, go ahead. I
yeah,
was
yeah.
gonna say, real quick, you and I were at Booming World together, and we were
Yeah.
also at the Booming World in California back in like October, I think, of last year. And I remember, I think we were together when I had a quick chat with Stephen Lucas in the hallway, and what I said to him, and again, this is not that long ago, it's like 8 months ago. I said, everyone's talking about the text generative capability of these Gen AI models, and that is amazing and it's fascinating. But for me, the really exciting thing is what I called interactive AI, and that has now been successfully rebranded as AI agents. What do you think about these things? There were some very interesting comments from the chief product officer and chief technology officers, Matt McClarty, and some of the other folks at Boomi saying, do we need connectors anymore? I mean, are these AI agents going to do everything? And they're like, well, they're going to try to build a registry for them. This is really major stuff in terms of changing the dynamics. And again, early stages. We don't know exactly how this stuff is going to work out. But to me, the AI agent, that's the new hot thing, and it's also not really well understood, and it's also tremendously disruptive. What do you think about that?
Yeah, there's going to be a whole new world of agents. I've heard it called agentic AI,
Ah,
uh, which the phrase is a little awkward, but
right.
I think it will end up sticking. But this idea that you're going to have all these agents for your AI, the agents are going to be like the new apps, and you're going to have these role-based agents so that every enterprise app needs to have multiple agents to deal with the combination of roles and functionalities that the app supports, and then with that AI layer put in to actually augment your decision making capabilities and
Right.
to parse language. Yeah, I see that as being the way that this is going to work at the end of the day. Because honestly, uh, normal mortals such as ourselves are not going to be fine tuning models to try to figure out how to get to that next stage. We are going to use a series of interfaces to get to the AI that are already configured to the way that we work. We're going to need these agents in place to
Interesting.
actually serve as the in betweens between us and the AI that ends up winning the day
Right.
over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I have to say, I think that AI will increasingly be a component part of enterprise workflows. And I think eventually these foundational models will subsume many different segments of what are now discrete technology spaces like CRM, like Salesforce type technologies, functionality. It's all going to kind of melt and meld and fuse together. You will have discrete technologies, and I do think that the data warehouse is going to remain a very strong component because it's the deterministic side, right? And you're going to need moorings to kind of guide this stuff. So RAG models are going to be huge. I think almost every company, this is what I meant by refactoring, is going to have to figure out how are we going to fit into these workflows and still add value and do things that the models aren't going to do better than we can, and, like, all bets are off on that front. What do you think?
Yeah, and so we're seeing this flattening of work, and the only good comparison I have is to when enterprise search and Google search started really working.
Interesting.
Because we are old enough to remember how you used to have to do research, and it was
Right.
this whole hodgepodge of everything from going to the library to using all these apps to using these proprietary applications that might be in place. And it took weeks to find literally one piece of data that you might be looking for.
Right.
Nowadays, you ask a question, and although Google seems to be having some hiccups nowadays, you get your answer in 12 seconds, and it was probably the right answer. You know,
Right.
knowledge is literally at our fingertips. And
Yeah.
we're going to start seeing that same type of flattening in terms of understanding what process should I be using? How do I actually get from A to B? Things that we have never before considered as having a clear answer are now going to, because we now are going to be able to open up processes and capabilities and documents in a way that we just haven't had access to previously.
Right. And I'll throw one last question over at you. I had this idea flying into Boomi World. I'm just thinking to myself about how everything is changing, how powerful these models are at being able to grab bits and pieces of information and fuse them together in seconds. And I thought
Yeah,
about how these models, they don't care about inner joins and outer joins. And there's a whole lot of blocking and tackling that these old-fashioned systems have to do to get you to the point where you can ask the right question and get an answer. Well, that's kind of all out the window. I mean, it's not all out the window, but it's like mostly out the window, basically. And I thought to myself, I think a forward-looking company is going to deploy a small language model in their data center. They're going to carve out, say, 20% of their on-prem data center, just retool it to run a small language model. Then they're going to train it on their ERP, their CRM, their Salesforce, their ticketing systems, that whatever they've got, they're going to throw at this thing. And then you're going to set up a user interface, and you're going to set up probably Kafka topics coming in from those systems to a vector database. And the executives are just going to sit there all day and ask questions like, are we on plan for marketing? What should we do next? Who do I lay off if I'm having trouble? Like all that kind of stuff. And they're just going to get answers all day long. And they might not all be right, but most of them are probably going to be right. And I think that's going to completely rewrite how business is done. But what do you think?
Yeah, and I'm with you on that one. And so the irony is, generative AI is fantastic at writing SQL. Actually,
Right.
it's great
Right.
at those inner joins, and outer joins, and taking all of that for granted and just structuring data together. If you ask it how to do it the right way, and also generative AI is actually pretty good at helping to reverse engineer schemas and assumptions around data, going back into the ERP and CRM and figuring out what are the foundational drivers for some of the results that we're looking for. So a lot of that question and answer capability is going to be very much an executive capability over the next couple of years. I would not be surprised to see Snowflake actually make an announcement along those lines, talking about how it's going back into all of your enterprise source data and creating better
Wow.
answers and creating greater insights, both reverse engineering the true enterprise schema that exists across all of your major applications, as well as figuring out how your model is going to work to help support those decisions at the end of the day. I would
Wow.
not at all be surprised to see that, because that is definitely in Snowflake's wheelhouse to talk about how do we get all the enterprise data and then suck all the value out, and then of course charge you for it. But
And of course,
but
charge you
also
for it.
doing it in a way that executives are going to want from a business perspective.
Right. And I think it's all going to be about centers of gravity going forward. Snowflake has a major center of gravity. Databricks has a major center of gravity. So are the big hyperscalers, Microsoft, obviously Google. Although, they're a little bit nervous these days from what I've seen. I've never seen Google so nervous. Quite frankly, it's kind of a weird thing to see, but they know, man, they see the handwriting all over the walls and they're trying. Real hard. Well, folks, we got a break coming up here, but look up this gentleman online. Incredibly smart, incredibly savvy, always has good insights. Hyoun Park from Amalgam Insights. We'll be right back. You're listening to DM Radio.